Throw away every single bit of knowledge you have about buying an iPad because any previous video you've watched up until this point is extremely outdated, including my own, which is sad because they still get views, so I'm part of the problem here. Because Apple just released the first public beta of iPadOS 26, which will be launching publicly in just 1 month from now. And this software changes everything you know about the iPad and its capabilities, especially on the cheaper iPad models, which now get enhanced capabilities that they've never had before, meaning that you might be able to save even more money on your next iPad purchase because these iPads are better than ever before. Therefore, I think it would be more helpful for me to start at the bottom of the lineup and talk about what these iPads are capable of, and then go by what advancements you get by going up for the next specific model, because everyone should start at this regular iPad. This is the lowest cost iPad in the lineup, and it is a great deal. It starts at $350, but honestly, if you go to Amazon, you can probably find this one for as low as $300. And for this price point, it packs in the entire iPad experience, which is crazy. And that's even more true now than it was when it launched, because this iPad used to be limited in its multitasking features, but no more, because this iPad is also compatible with iPadOS 26, which now brings full windowed support even to the base level iPad. So yes, you can now open up multiple applications, move around the windows freely, resize them, and use gestures to tile them. And each window also now gets the same traffic light controls to close the window, minimize it, or maximize it. If you're using a mouse or trackpad or a keyboard case, there's even a redesigned cursor, and yes, dragging the cursor up or swiping down from the top reveals a macOS inspired menu bar where you can find all the controls for that app. Basically, if you've ever used a Mac before, you are getting a very similar windowing system just now on your iPad. And this software upgrade also brings a range of improvements to the overall system. For example, you now get background tasks so you can render a video or complete a large export and still use your iPad for other things. It's not frozen on a progress bar anymore. You also get a redesigned Files app, you get better dock support with the ability to add folders to the dock for quick access, and external audio output controls, and even staple macOS apps like Preview are now available on the iPad. Those are huge updates, and in previous years, updates like this were exclusive to the top level iPads running on the latest M series chip. So with Apple's cheapest iPad able to access all of these new features, makes it a great value. So the question you have to ask isn't, what do I give up by going for the base level iPad? It's, what do you gain by going for the more expensive models? Well, that next model up is the M3 iPad Air, and at first glance, it looks exactly the same as the previous iPad. But there are some striking differences here. First of all, the design is thinner than the regular iPad, and the build quality does feel much better. It feels more tight in its construction, less hollow, because there's a lot less unused internal space. The Air also has a better display that looks more vivid, it supports more colors, has better color accuracy, and the screen is laminated directly to the glass, removing the air gap, and it also has an anti-reflective display coating, which reduces glares from nearby bright lights and is better for outdoor use. But you might have noticed something else, a little extra with my iPad Air, and it is this matte finish. And there's no nano texture option for the iPad Air on Apple's website. Well, thankfully, you can upgrade any iPad display with a paper-like screen protector. Yes, this is the original paper-like screen protector that uses nano dot technology, adding tiny microbeads across the screen to make it feel and sound like you're writing on an actual physical piece of paper. It feels so much better writing on this than the regular iPad's glossy and slippery display. And with the new journal app in iPadOS 26, it actually makes me look forward to sitting down and writing on my iPad because the experience feels so much like writing in a physical journal. Not only does it give me a better writing and drawing experience with my Apple Pencil, but the Paperlike's matte finish also coats the iPad with an extra layer of diffusion, which helps to eliminate more glares and distractions from bright light sources, it is a must-have on the regular iPad, which lacks the anti-reflective display coating. The Paperlike screen protector is the only screen protector that feels like it's giving your iPad display an upgrade while also protecting the display. So to upgrade your iPad's display, check out the Paperlike in the description below, and thank you to Paperlike for sponsoring this video. Now, it's not only the screen or the design of the iPad Air that gets an upgrade, it's also the accessories, and that is partly thanks to a new Magic Keyboard case that has the same floating design that you would get on the iPad Pro. And this one is definitely easier to set up than the kickstand case that the regular iPad has. This is a very unique keyboard case that Apple, for some reason, made for this base level iPad. Both keyboards feel similar to type on. The Magic Keyboard on the iPad Air does have a slightly larger and better trackpad, in my opinion. And, you know, in terms of just the overall aesthetic, I gotta give it to the iPad Air. But the one thing I will give this regular iPad case that is pretty unique is that, yeah, you can detach the keyboard from the case and still have the back of the case attached, which is kind of clutch for just propping up the iPad and watching a video without having this keyboard case attached. So I will give that win to the iPad. But that isn't the end of the accessory difference, because the iPad Air also has better Apple Pencil support, because while it can use the cheaper USB-C Apple Pencil that you can use on the regular iPad, the iPad Air also gets the option to use a more advanced Apple Pencil Pro, which does not work on the regular iPad. Now listen, if you're just using the Apple Pencil for handwritten notes or even some basic drawing, these work about the same. However, the Apple Pencil Pro does have a lot of advanced features that make it worth it for professional users. Number one, it can magnetically charge on the top of the iPad, which is definitely better than charging this one with USB-C, just a little annoying. And like I just mentioned, it has a lot of features that a professional or hobbyist artist will appreciate, like pressure sensitivity, a hover feature for previewing where the pencil will land, and a gyroscope that lets you rotate brush tools, and a squeeze gesture that lets you quickly access additional pen tools or other shortcuts. So namely, you're getting a better screen on the iPad Air and different accessories. But the real big upgrade on the iPad Air is the M3 chip. And while the base level iPad has an A16 chip that is certainly capable and fast, the M3 is a much better chip for users who are looking to do more demanding tasks on their iPad. Tasks like video editing, photo editing, rendering, faster background tasks, or even having a large amount of windows open in the background all run smoother and faster on the iPad Air. And while the A16 in the iPad can handle mobile games, it unfortunately does not support higher-end console-level titles like Resident Evil, which actually run extremely well on the M3 chip. Now, I did start off this video by covering iPadOS 26 and showing off how similar the software features will be between every iPad model this year. But there is one big exclusive software feature that comes to the iPad Air and iPad Pro that is not on the regular iPad, and that is the full external display support. The base iPad does kind of support external displays, but it's a mirrored view and it's in the 4:3 aspect ratio. And I don't think this is just a chip limitation on the regular iPad. I think it also has to do with the slower USB-C port, which only supports data speeds up to 480 megabits per second, whereas the iPad Air gets a much faster USB-C port at 10 gigabits per second. So whether that's hooking it up to an external display, or if you want to hook it up to like external storage or something that just requires faster data speeds, well, the iPad Air is a big upgrade there. You also have more display options with the Air. Both the iPad and iPad Air come with an 11-inch display, but only the Air gets an optional 13-inch display model, although you will have to pay $200 more to get that upgrade. But naturally, that brings up the next question, because if you're still watching this video, you probably haven't made up your mind on getting an iPad or an iPad Air, and you may be wondering, what are you really gaining by going for Apple's highest-end iPad? Give me a second here. The iPad Pro. And I'll tell you what you get. You get to give Apple $400 more and walk out of the store spending more money to get the same experience you could get on the iPad Air. Okay, that's partly true. Yes, picking between an iPad Air and an iPad Pro in terms of software upgrades, there aren't really any different experiences. Like, you're not going to be getting some software upgrades buying the Pro model. It really comes down to just better hardware. And yes, when you buy a Pro model, the first thing you think of is performance. And yes, the M4 chip in the iPad Pro is faster than the M3 chip in the iPad Air. However, here's what might surprise you. When you go to buy most Pro products, it's because of performance, and that is not the reason to buy the iPad Pro, because ultimately, the speed differences between these devices is kind of negligible, especially in day-to-day use, and certainly not worth the $400 upgrade. Funny enough, to see the most difference between the Pro and the Air model, you actually have to buy a 1TB iPad Pro or higher, because that's the model that comes with a full 10-core M4 CPU and 16GB of memory, whereas the other models get a 9-core CPU and the same 8GB of memory as the iPad Air. But that 1TB model starts at $1,600. Think about how many base model iPads you could buy with that money. So for the Pro, forget about performance. The only reason you should actually buy a Pro is if you care about display quality, because the Pro has the most advanced display out of any iPad, and as a matter of fact, out of any Apple product, because this upgrades the standard LCD display on the iPad Air to a dual layer tandem OLED display. And that OLED display on the iPad Pro offers a lot of benefits, like a 2,000,000 to 1 contrast ratio, which just stomps all over the Air's 1,550 to 1 contrast ratio. This means that the iPad Pro can offer true black levels and better colors. The screen also gets twice as bright at 1000 nits of full screen brightness and supports true HDR at 1600 nits of peak brightness. The iPad Pro is just so much better at separating highlights from dark areas on the display, creating a really rich contrast that just makes everything pop so much more than the LCD display on the iPad Air. To top it off, the iPad Pro also has a faster 120Hz ProMotion display, which doubles the refresh rate of the iPad Air. This makes everything look and feel so much smoother for scrolling and animations, and even gameplay on certain games with faster frame rates is gonna look smoother on an iPad Pro. It's also a practical feature for people that use the Apple Pencil Pro, because there's less perceivable lag and latency when drawing on the display. And to me, the Apple Pencil on the iPad Pro feels like a one-to-one interaction where I can't sense any delay from the Apple Pencil putting the digital ink on the screen. The iPad Pro display just looks so much better than the iPad Airs, and it is the primary, maybe the only reason you should actually be spending all that extra money to upgrade to the Pro. Okay, that's not the only reason. Yes, hardware-wise, the iPad, it's also a better design. It's actually the thinnest product that Apple sells, and despite the name, the Air actually weighs more than the iPad Pro. Like, the 13-inch iPad Pro almost feels as light as an 11-inch iPad Air. And it is one of the only times I've gotten the larger iPad Pro where it feels just as good as a tablet as it does a laptop replacement, because of how thin and light it is. The iPad Pro also gets a lot of other nice upgrades, like a better 4-speaker system, which sounds louder, richer, and fuller than the 2-speaker stereo systems they use in the iPad and the iPad Air. And while the cameras are mostly the same across all iPad models, the iPad Pro is the only model that doesn't unlock with the Touch ID sensor and the power button. Instead, it has Face ID, just like on the iPhone, which I think is a much faster way to unlock your iPad, especially when you're using it with the keyboard case. And yes, the rear camera is a 12-megapixel camera, and it has the LiDAR scanner, which I guess is better if you're using AR applications. But again, I don't think most people are using the rear iPad cameras for anything. And yes, accessories. Every iPad, of course, has to have a different keyboard case, right? That is smart. That is the smart thing to do, Apple, right? Yes, the iPad Pro also has its own separate keyboard. It's similar to the iPad Air's Magic Keyboard. Actually, the Air's keyboard is based on the iPad Pro's, but the iPad Pro's is more premium. It actually is made out of metal on the top, so it has like aluminum palm rests, and the trackpad also is haptic across the entire trackpad, whereas the iPad Air still uses a physical clicking mechanism. So I find that the haptic trackpad is just a little bit more responsive, and I feel like that is a really nice upgrade on the iPad Pro. Oh, and the USB-C port on the iPad Pro is a Thunderbolt port, which lets you use it with more Thunderbolt accessories or docks and supports faster 40 gigabits per second speed, although the external display support is exactly the same on the iPad Pro as it is on the iPad Air. Lastly, you do also have the option of getting a nano texture display, which will cost you quite a lot because not only is it a $100 upgrade, but again, that is only on the 1 terabyte model or higher. You know, you could just buy a Paper-Like screen protector. I'm just saying. Okay, now there is one other iPad we didn't talk about yet that is actually in between the iPad and the iPad Air. I'm just gonna put these all here. Just gonna collapse all these, make it easier on myself. Yes, we're talking about this little guy, the iPad mini. The funny thing about the mini is it's actually not a smaller version of the regular base model iPad. It's actually a smaller version of the iPad Air. It has a more similar design to the iPad Air and basically the same screen technology as the iPad Air. It's just a mini version of that product with an 8.3-inch display instead of an 11-inch display. Now you might expect me to start this part off by saying the iPad mini doesn't have the same software features and windowing capabilities as the other iPads, but believe it or not, this fully supports the same windowing system as the larger iPads, which sure, you're probably not going to multitask with 4 windows open on an iPad mini, but I like that Apple gives you this option. And I feel like this is how it should be. You shouldn't constrain the product just because it has a smaller screen. If the hardware is capable of doing it, let it do it. And Apple doing that with iPadOS 26, I think is a big step forward because in years past, they have restricted this device. The Mini is also kind of powerful. It has a better chip than the standard iPad with an A17 Pro chip, so it actually does support those more demanding video games. And it's pretty easy to turn the Mini into a Nintendo Switch-like device with additional gaming controller accessories. And just like the Air, it does support the Apple Pencil Pro if you want to turn this into a small digital sketchbook or a full-blown artist tablet. Basically, what I'm trying to say is the iPad mini can do really most of the things the larger iPads can do. But the thing I really like about the mini is every other iPad that I have on my table is kind of trying to be a laptop replacement, which is why they all have these keyboard accessories. And that versatility is a strength in the iPad lineup. It is cool that you can use these as a tablet, or you can use traditional keyboard and trackpad controls. But that versatility also kind of brings a weakness to the iPad, and that is getting rid of simplicity. And I think one of the things that made the original iPad great was that it was simple to use because it just focused on being a great tablet without needing any other additional accessories. And the only iPad that still captures that simplicity, that still just tries to give you a true tablet experience without the heavy ambition of being a laptop replacement, is the iPad mini. I mean, it doesn't even have a smart connector to attach a physical keyboard to. Apple does not make a keyboard accessory for this. So the iPad mini is kind of its own unique experience. It's kind of like frozen in time, where people don't really buy tablets to just use as tablets anymore. But this thing is still a great small tablet, and I can see why a lot of people love it. Which is all to say, if you want a small iPad, well, this is the only one to get. But if you want larger iPads, you have plenty of choices, and ultimately, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. But the point I wanted to illustrate in this video is that the capabilities of the iPad lineup are closer than they have ever been before. So rather than thinking about the capabilities of each device, you're really picking between options of good, better, and best. Because for most people, that standard iPad is going to do everything you want an iPad to do, and then some. And because it now starts at 128 gigabytes of storage, this is the best valued iPad in Apple's entire history. And now with iPadOS 26, this isn't just a cheap iPad. This is a full-blown computer that can 100% replace a MacBook. And at $300, that almost sounds too good to be true. But it isn't. Still, there's always going to be people that need more, and for people that want to do more professional level tasks, want a better display, well, the iPad Air is the clear choice, and for those that want the best screen and the best speakers, the ultimate hardware experience, and don't mind paying a little, a lot extra, well, the iPad Pro is a good choice, although it isn't as necessary as it used to be. All right, but that is my updated buyer's guide for all of Apple's iPads with iPadOS 26. If you want to purchase an iPad after watching this video, check out the description for links to every iPad. And if this video helped you out, give me a like, subscribe for more, and let me know, what iPad do you think most people should buy? As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Take care, everyone, and there's never been a better time to buy an iPad. iPadOS 26, it solved a lot of problems.